I'm Elijah. It's really surprising that 3D can make this! Whoops.
Two-dimensional planes. That's what all games were like, simple and gorgeous. With the NES starting to refine what gaming could be like, the SNES enhanced it and its art. So many fun and good-looking games. Donkey Kong Country, Super Mario World, Mega Man X, Sonic 3, and so many more. So many people, including myself, asked, what was next? So many companies responded and said, let's add a third plane. But many couldn't do it at that time. Some games mostly gave off the illusion of looking 3D, like Pilot Wings and F-Zero for example, and some 3D looking games like Donkey Kong Country and Mario RPG look 3D, but really aren't. What I mean is that they basically just took a 3D model and took pictures of it as a 2D sprite. But when games like Star Fox first came out, people then realized that 3D was awesome. So with the N64, PlayStation, and Sega Saturn coming out that time, 3D gaming could look good and still be fun.
Welcome to the ugliest year in gaming. Not many people like the look of it, but it was a part of their life. Like puberty.
3D gaming was a rough time for the video game market as new franchises would be worked on. But old franchises had to make the transition to stand out. Many tried converting their 2D styles into 3D, or create new game styles somewhat working, while some not going so great. You have to realize, they're not working with 2 dimensions anymore. You can't just lay things out left and right. They also have to work on another axis in order to make things feel full. Also, many people can't play 3D games. There are so much things to do that they don't even know where to start. Partially, I'm guilty of the same thing too. I tried to play Shrek Forever After on the Nintendo DS and then went, what do I do? But now companies know what and how to make their 2D games work in 3D. And that was a definite curveball they had to overcome in the 90s. One of everybody's favorite shining examples of 2D to 3D is Super Mario 64. The Super Mario Bros. Series are linear run and jump action games where you reach the end of the level. With the transition of 3D, some things had to be added and changed. For example, they intended to feature the flagpole in the other games to show the end of a stage. Overall, they were just going to do a straight conversion of 2D Mario into 3D. But they more or less stuck with the open world sandbox style of gaming. Developers found it more fun to run around and explore things at their own pace, even without clearing objectives. While they were less than what Super Mario World had to offer, which makes up for it for the multiple objectives that you have and different worlds to discover to traverse. Plus, it's still Mario at the end of the day. Mario's all about running and jumping, but now he has a 3D space with weird camera controls. Yeah, that was a problem with most games this era, not only Mario. Nintendo made a new character in order to tell you how the camera works. Even with the flaws, many people, including myself, have to admit that this is the greatest 3D experience ever. While most games had to change up their formula in order to accommodate the 3D features, some games didn't even need to change it. The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, and Metal Gear Solid, in my opinion, are the 3D versions of their 2D counterparts. As they are mostly top-down 2D adventure games, it's easy to see this in 3D opposed to Mario. Basically just put the camera down and near the character and bada bing bada boom we have 3D. However, you can't just do a full conversion of 2D. There are some things that had to be changed or added. In Ocarina of Time, Link was given Z targeting to make it easy for aiming and automatic jumps from edges. Metal Gear Solid on the other hand, yeah, they didn't even change much. It's like that one guy that you saw in kindergarten still looks the same. Go ahead, you see no difference. Hell, I'm even opposed to them making a 2D version of Metal Gear Solid. Speaking of Metal Gear, Konami actually tried both 3D and 2D for better and for worse. Konami's flagship title, Castlevania, tried both with Castlevania Symphony of the Night, a 2D game with RPG elements and non-linear progression, similar to Metroid. This is what obviously created the term Metroidvania. But after you take a turn on Albuquerque and go back to the N64, you'd wish that you stayed at Albuquerque. And that's not the only franchise that Konami screwed up. Take a look at Contra Legacy of War. You go from fast-paced action to what the hell even is this?
See, that's the thing I didn't get about most video game companies this time. Many of them thought that 3D was simple as put their character's camera behind them, boom, 3D. That's just life. Some 3D games don't work with a 2D formula. But when it does, it creates a whole new game formula, and then they create another one, and then another.
Sonic the Hedgehog, Sega's mega popular franchise, tried their hands at 3D as early in Sonic 3's development. That was later scrapped into making Sonic 3D Blast, Sonic's first 3D game. And who are they trying to fool with this? Not me. Sonic R was a 3D racing game that wasn't good. Sonic Jam had a 3D overworld to explore, but no true 3D Sonic game was in sight. Sonic Extreme was a 3D Sonic game that was in development, but due to numerous delays, it was cancelled. It seemed that Sonic couldn't break out into 3D until they used Sonic's 2D physics into 3D and create Sonic's first real 3D Sonic game on his new system, the Dreamcast. Yeah, I forgot what the name was, but it spawned one of the greatest rock bands of all time. As usual, things were added and changed to make Sonic work in 3D, like the homing attack to lock on into enemies, while adding multiple characters in the game to beef up playtime. Sonic Adventure at its core, what Mario 64 was going to be like. It feels like a 2D Sonic game, but got an upgrade in the form of good sounding music and an extra axis. Sonic was doing well in 3D, until Sega ran out of ideas and didn't know what to do with him. That was in terms of 3D games. The 2D games mostly stayed consistent, sometimes adding in a new gimmick, while the 3D games kept flipping on a coin with the quality also being flipped on that same coin. There were so many playstyles with this guy that we didn't even know what to do with him next, until an open world Sonic game.
We got to a little tangent here, so let's talk about nothing Sega related and talk about Golden Axe, which was made by
the fantasy beat-em-up game back in the arcades by Sega would eventually release a 3D game in 2008. Well, after 3D was established, this game broke so many boundaries, mostly bad. Yeah, it's poorly designed and mediocre, even though it came out when 3D games were the norm. Now, what I call late 3D games, which are games that came out when 3D was established, didn't mean all of them were bad. Metroid Prime came out on the GameCube as a first-person 3D shooter, which was met with some criticism and controversy, but everyone ended up opening up and enjoying it. Kirby could have eventually went to 3D a long time ago, but they didn't and they never will. You bastards! One character that hasn't went the full jump was Yoshi. Go ahead, name all the 3D Yoshi games there are. Apart from being playable from Mario 64 DS, that's all we got. There was gonna be a 3D Yoshi game on the N64 developed by Argonaut Software, famed for Star Fox and Star Fox 64, but Nintendo turned it down and Argonaut reworked it into Croc Legend of the Gobos. And that was another thing that most companies did back then. They turned something as old as Pac-Man and turned it into something new like Pac-Man. If you didn't get it yet, Pac-Man is an arcade game by and large. With the PlayStation being unleashed onto the world, Namco decided to bring Pac-Man into the 3D world, which I originally found weird, then realized that Pac-Man did some weird shit in 2D. Thus, they created Pac-Man Ghost World, that was ultimately cancelled. Some problems with it was that it was going to have a grittier tone and was going to operate on the same control scheme and layout as Bubsy 3D. We can't allow that. And then with the series' 20th anniversary at the time, they reworked the game into, what? This isn't 3D, this is 2D with 3D graphics. Overall, it feels good and somewhat feels like Pac-Man. I mean, granted there are 3D elements in the game, but it's mainly 2D. Like, what does it do other than like move back and forth in the camera? What are you gonna do? Nothing, that's it.
I gotta give props to Namco, as they made an arcade game into a 3D platformer, which was really hard back in the day, because not many did it. I mean, there was Space Invaders Invasion Day on the PS2, but nobody even gave a shit about it. It still does.
Gaming had to change in this era to accommodate for the 3D graphics at the time. So much blood, sweat, and tears went into making these games that may ultimately end up failing. It was a really tough time for developers to actually keep their franchises afloat. Nowadays, developers like Nintendo discovered what it takes to make a 2D game 3D. Super Mario 3D Land and World are 3D Mario games but act like 2D ones. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is an open world game that acts like the original NES games. And that's the key word I'm saying, discover. We look at what makes 3D and 2D games fun, and then putting them together to create this creative blend. It took time and actual patience to make these games fun, and then they'll keep discovering as time goes on, seeing what they will keep relative and keep the gaming experience enjoyable. And then there's Bubsy 3D. F this garbage.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a video just to make fun of Bubsy.